everybody, I am Eleni and this is Kutná Hora, the City of Silver. Long before it became a board game, Kutná Hora started as a medieval valley that turned into one of the most important European cities of the Renaissance because of its mines and booming silver. So in this game, players take charge of wealthy families, each with influence in various guilds. They use their wealth to expand the mines and build the city of Kutná Hora. The economy in the game is dynamic and it changes as the city grows, driven by the choices of the players. So to win in this game, you need to adapt to the price fluctuations and you need to keep your eyes open for opportunities. In this video, as you probably know from the title, I'm going to teach you step by step how to play the game. And the first thing I'd like to introduce you to is the card stands. These are no regular card stands. They are some sort of cardboard computers. The economy of the game is based on 6 commodities, the value of which constantly changes depending on what the players do in the game, and their prices are depicted on these cards. But we'll see how these work in detail later on. For now, we're just going to assemble the card stands. The cards should be in order when you take them out of the packaging. So you just put the orange deck in the orange card stand and the blue deck goes in the blue card stand. The indicator arms start all the way to the left. This top row is for wood, this middle row is for food, and the bottom row is for beer. The Brewers Guild was very important in the Czech lands in the 1300s, and 700 years later, Czechs still consume more beer per capita than any other country in the world. But the important thing here is that you have your card stands ready, and they can be stored in the box, fully assembled, loaded with cards, ready for a new game. But before we can delve right into the how to play, let's first prepare the setup of the game so that you can also get familiar with the land of Kutná Hora. Here's the board of the game and you place this side with the fewer squares for a 2-player game or this side for 3 or 4 players. Here's where you place the town hall board and above it there's the rounds track. You choose the side corresponding to the number of players and you place the rounds counter on the first space. On the lowest part of the board we have the mines. You take the rock tiles, shuffle them and deal them face down to the mining spaces according to the setup card. And then you turn them face up. By the way, you use this setup card for your first game, but there are 15 different setup cards you can choose from. Then you take the mine tiles face down and group them according to their number and shuffle them. You then make one big stack using the mining tile stack with the 1 tiles on top, the 2 tiles in the middle and the 3 tiles on the bottom and place them on the prospecting board, which you keep next to the mines area. These tiles are not exactly mines, but they represent the current level of mining technology. They go in order with the level 1 technology on the top and are placed here next to the mine stack. Going north, you see the area where we will build the town. It starts out empty. Then you group the guild buildings into 6 stacks by color. From each stack, take the tile with the marked corner. You shuffle the 6 marked tiles and deal them randomly to the first 2 columns on the town hall board. Their starting squares are marked like the tiles. You place the remaining 3 tiles from each stack in a random order on top of the matching tile on the board. The tiles are face up until the building is built on the board. The tiles with the marked corner are at the bottom of their stacks. Then you group the green, silver and yellow patrician buildings into 3 stacks by color. Each stack is mixed randomly and placed at the end of a row on the space corresponding to the depicted patrician. There's also a red patrician stack, but you place it on the rounds track, on the marked square that shows in which round they come into play. From now on, we'll refer to all these as public buildings. Anybody can build them, but no one will own them, as we'll see later on. You then place the tax counter on space 0 of the tax track, which runs along the bottom of the rounds track. Keep the coins near the board to form a bank, along with the pelican tokens and the patrician tokens. Last, you set up St. Barbara's Cathedral where everyone can see it. These tiles are not random. They each have a little number on the bottom, and you put them together in that order to form the Cathedral of St. Barbara, the patron saint of miners. 1 to 5 goes on the bottom, 6 to 10 in the middle, and 11 on top. To complete the setup, we also need to do the player setup, which is simple. You take the pieces in your color and put them on your board where they obviously belong. You place the house tokens in the squares on your board, and you place 3 plot markers in the spaces in the upper left corner. Your 4 income markers start at 0 on each of the income tracks, and you keep the other income markers nearby in case your income goes over 10. Miners go in the reserve zone here, but 1 goes in your available miner pool ready to go to work. Each player places a marker on the score counter, and a reputation marker starts at 0 on the reputation track. Note that there is ample room for your reputation to go negative. Then, each player gets a combination of 3 guilds. For your first game, you will use this setup card showing the available combination sets, and since it's your first game, just pick whichever combination set you like the most and place it as you see it on your player board. As players get more familiar with the game, they can draft the guilds and even place them on their board in the order they wish. So check the rulebook for details in your more advanced games. The starting player also gets 40 groschen, the coins, and the starting player token. The next player gets 41, the next 42, and the fourth player, if you have one, gets 43. For a more deluxe experience, there's also these beautiful metal coins you could use instead by buying them as a separate accessory. And finally, you take a set of 6 action cards and you're ready to go. And now that we're all set up, let's jump right into the gameplay. The game is played in rounds, and in each round players take turns, beginning with the starting player and proceeding clockwise around the table. Each player will get 3 turns, and on your turn, you play 2 cards, except for your third turn, when you choose only one of the 2 cards you have left. So by the end of one round, you will have played 5 cards and taken 5 actions. When you play a card, you choose which of the 2 actions to use, so you have to do a bit of planning ahead. For example, if you want to use these 2 income actions later, you don't want to use this card for your building action, but you should use this one instead. So now it's time to get into the action. Let's start with the mining action. When you play the mine card action, you start by drawing mining tiles. In the beginning, you can draw only 1 because the mining technology is at level 1. But if it were at, say, 3, you would draw 3 and choose 1. Now you want to check for a space to build your tile. The very first mine needs to be built on one of the 2 entrances, but once there is a mine on the board already, you can build beside or below any mine. The cost is shown by this number here. Building on the entrance costs 2 wood. Building next to this mine costs 3 wood. On a space like this, with 2 different costs, you have to pay the higher cost, in this case 3 wood. Now, we don't actually have any wood tokens in the game. When the cost says 3 wood, you have to actually pay with groschen, the coins. All of the commodities in the game are virtual, meaning that you see how much each one is worth in the market at the moment, and you calculate it in coins. You look at the commodity indicator. It says wood costs 2 coins right now. So for a cost of 3 wood, you actually pay 6 coins. And you can take your mine tile and put your available miner on it. And now you resolve all the effects on the tile. This mine gives you 2 ore production, so you move your ore income indicator up 2 spaces. The other effect increases ore production in the economy, so the ore deck should go from 0 to 2. As you probably noticed, this practically affected the price of ore. It went from 3 down to 2. This is because the mines are producing more ore. The supply is higher, so the price went down as the demand has not increased yet. Looking at this other mine tile, it has this effect, which actually spreads stories of jobs in Kutná Hora. More people come to the town and the population rises, so in this case, wood price just went up from 2 to 3. There is an advantage to building a mine before the population increases, as the cost will be lower. So we've seen that mines can increase your personal ore production, but they can also play a role in scoring. At the end of the game, you will count up these stars in each row. The total number shows how much that row is worth. If you have the most stars, you will get the most points for that row. We'll look at an example later. The point is that the plays you make now are setting up scoring opportunities later in the game. When you take a mining action, there's one more thing you need to pay attention to: your miners. You start the game with one available miner in your miner pool. If you play a mine action when your pool is empty, you have to start by filling the pool. This costs 1 permit to move in 2 miners, and you can only replenish miners during a mining action, so you need to always make sure you have enough money for the entire action before you jump into the mining tiles. Right now, permits are 4 coins. So on my next mine action, I will have to pay 4 coins to move 2 miners into the mining pool, and then I will use one of them to mark my new mine. So that was life in the mines. What about the town? How are we gonna build the city of Kutná Hora? Well, it's actually a medieval bureaucratic process requiring 3 steps. 1, we need the rights to a building tile. 2, we need a plot for that tile, and only then we can play the building action, if we can pay for it, of course. Let's go through the details of each action. There is some debate whether it's smarter to play plot and then rights or rights and then plot. I think for new players, it's probably easier to think about what you want to build before deciding where to build it. So let's have a look first at the rights action. The rights action lets you take one of these building tiles and always the top tile of a stack. Aside from the public buildings, you may only choose a tile that belongs to one of the guilds on your player board. The cost for acquiring a tile is over here. So these tiles are cheapest. They cost only 1 coin. The cost thereafter is in permits. So you'd have to multiply the number by the current price of permits. I cannot choose these 3 because I'm not a member of those guilds. The price of wood has gone up, and this woodworker's building is in the cheapest column, so I'm going to get rights for that. I take the building, I pay 1 coin, and I put it in a slot above my board. As you can see, you cannot have more than 3 buildings here. The last thing you do, you pick up the entire stack which you got the tile from, you push the other stacks into the empty space, and place the stack at the end of the row. So rights for the next wood building have suddenly become very expensive. Everything else in that row has gotten cheaper. So now we have something to build, but we have to figure out where. So that's why we need the plot action. At the beginning of the game, players can claim plots anywhere on the board. You just pay 5 coins and you put your marker on an empty square. But as soon as one player has built a building, everything changes. Now you have to claim plots next to a building, and the cost is printed on that building. If 2 buildings are by the square you want to claim, you have to pay the higher cost. So I ignore this 4 and pay 9 coins instead. So this base costs 4, these bases cost 9, and this base? That's a trick question. I cannot claim it, I have to claim a plot next to a building. But what if all these bases are claimed? Well, then we're back to the original rule. I can claim any empty plot for 5 coins. So now you have claimed a nice plot and you have the rights to a building. Now we can do the building action, if we can pay for it. This building costs 4 wood. Wood right now is 3 coins, so I have to pay 12 coins for the building, and I can then resolve its effects. My wood production goes up by 3. I'm rich. But the wood indicator also moves 1 notch to the right, so wood went down to 1. I guess I'm not so rich. This will happen every time you build a guild building. Your production for that commodity will go up, but the price of a commodity will go down, although usually it's not quite this drastic. Why is this one different from the other numerals? This means that the price is as low as it can go, and no one else is allowed to build a brown building until the price goes up again. And there's more effects we didn't resolve on our sawmill. The workers there tell everyone about the new jobs available in Kutná Hora, and the population goes up. And hey, wood went up to 2. My income just doubled. 2 is still quite low though. it is still true that no one can build a second brown building until the demand for wood is higher. Once I'm done with effects, I flip the tile over and finally, I put a house on my building. The house comes from the row of the matching guild, and I always use up houses from left to right. And each house removed triggers an effect. In the bottom row, removing the house moves me up a certain amount on the reputation track. In the middle row, removing the house gets me a pelican token. Yay! Well, you don't know what these do yet, but we'll get to them later. In the top row, removing the house lets me get rights to a public building for free. And it's probably a good time to talk about public buildings for a minute, because they're quite different from the guild buildings. First of all, they're generally more expensive to build, and they give you cool benefits, but they give you no income and they're not even yours. After you put your public building tile on your plot, it belongs to the town. You do not put your house on it. Even so, they can give you a lot of points. It's beneficial to have your buildings next to public buildings, because at the end of the game you'll get points for matching these dots to dots on adjacent buildings. Public buildings have 3 dots. So there's a lot to think about when you're choosing a building to get rights to and choosing a plot. But don't worry about this now, we'll go over it again when we talk about scoring. One last thing to explain before we leave the building action is when you build a Miners Guild building. As you see, it increases your ore production and the economy's ore production, but it doesn't move this indicator arm. Instead, it gives you a mining technology tile. This looks like a mine, and in fact it scores points just like a mine. You build it immediately, but you don't pay any wood for it, and you get a free miner directly from your reserve pool to mark the mine. This gives you a free 1-star mine, which will help you compete for points. The other major effect of taking the mining technology tile is that the technology level goes up by 1. Now, whenever anyone plays a mine action, they will get to draw 1 extra tile to choose from. So if you're a member of the Miners Guild, you get some control over how fast you get through the mining stack, meaning how fast tier 2 and 3 mines get into play, so whether people will see a lot of tiles and will have good options to choose from. The more lucrative mines are at the bottom of the stack, so if this technology level stays low all game, players may never see the best mines. And this gives you a good taste of the general gameplay of Kutná Hora. The game plays very differently because the economy is very dependent on the choices the players make. And that brings us to the income action. Remember, you start with about 40 coins and then you have to pay for rights and plots and woods and permit. Eventually that money will run out and you better hope you've built some income, because the only way to get some more money is through the income action. This action is simple. You just add up the value of all your commodities and gain that many coins. So I have 2 ore, and ore is at 2 right now, so that gives me 4 coins. And I also produce 4 wood, which is at 2, so I also get 8 coins from that. The other action left to explain, and it's only on one of your cards, is the St. Barbara action. In order to play this action, you need to have a pelican token to spend. If you have a token, you spend it by turning it to the other side. Then you use the effect on the current St. Barbara tile. For example, if I take a St. Barbara action right now, I would flip a pelican to gain 2 reputation. Then I flip that tile over and the effect is gone from the game, and the next in line is the new one that's available. Over the course of the game, players will build this cathedral from left to right, step by step. If you flip all 11 tiles, players can still play the St. Barbara action to increase reputation by 2. Even though we explained all the actions, there's one more on your cards: the Joker. As you'd expect, the Joker action lets you take any other action. It could be build, income, mine, whatever. Actually, don't use it for a mine, you can just use the other half of the card. But of course, there is a catch. Playing the Joker costs you 1 reputation. So let's have a closer look at the reputation track. These numbers here are points, but they're scored only at the end of the game, so you just ignore them for now. This is interesting. If your reputation goes so low that it cannot go lower, you lose 2 points each time you would lose 1 reputation. So reputation in Kutná Hora is not something to joke about. And of course, on the other end, if your reputation is as high as it can go, each subsequent gain gives you points. You probably won't get to those extremes very often, but here is something easily within reach. Once your reputation gets to 3, plots cost you only 1 coin. It doesn't matter what the adjacent buildings say, you pay 1 coin. And if your reputation gets high enough, you can play the Joker without losing reputation. I guess if people like you a lot, they're more willing to tolerate your jokes. So we've seen that your reputation can be affected by the Joker and by St. Barbara. Now it's time to discover that your reputation can also be affected by taxes. The tax marker starts the game at 0. But over the course of the game, taxes will rise. One way taxes rise is as an effect of certain public buildings. This building raises taxes by 2. Another way taxes rise is when guilds build St. Barbara. This effect on certain guild buildings tells you to flip over the current St. Barbara tile. You ignore the St. Barbara effect and increase taxes by the amount shown. And I should say that conversely, when you're working on St. Barbara by playing a St. Barbara action, you get the benefit shown on the tile and the tax shown below does not apply. Anyway, the point is that even though nobody really wants taxes to go up, players will take actions that have the consequence of rising taxes for everyone. Also, you might have extra property taxes if you have claimed empty plots on the board. If just 1 plot marker is in Kutná Hora, no problem. But if you have 2 markers off your board at the end of the round, you have to pay 3 extra in taxes, and if all 3 markers are claiming plots, you pay for both, so 8. Remember though, the markers come back as soon as you build on the plot, so it's not so hard to avoid this tax. Taxes are paid at the end of each round, and you can either pay the tax or take the reputation penalty. You can take the penalty even if you have enough money to pay the tax. The choice is yours. After all players have taken their 3 turns, the round is over, and there's some end of the round stuff, as you can see here. In the first round, taxes are the only thing that happens at the end of the round. Then you take all your action cards back and you are ready for round 2. At the end of round 2, in a 4-player game, or at the end of round 3 for a 2 or 3-player game, the red patrician tiles come into play. See how the board has 4 columns? Well, now we're gonna use them. You put one of the tiles randomly at the end of each row. They are expensive now, but remember that the stacks move each time a player buys rights to a building tile. Also remember that when you build something for your top row guild, you can take a public building for free. Except for the timing on when they come out, these red patrician buildings follow the same rules as all the other public buildings. And I guess you're wondering, okay, why do I need the patricians and what does each color do? The patricians matter for the final 3 rounds of the game, as every patrician here will score points at the end of each round to all the players who qualify. But you'll correctly say that there are no patricians on the board. Well, that's true. When the game starts, all the patrician tokens are hanging out in the bank with the coins and the pelican tokens. And they come into play when someone plays a public building. When you build this, in Kutná Hora, the matching patrician becomes available over here. But you need to bring them in the scoring zone for them to count. And that requires a bit of political influence. To be precise, 10 coins worth of influence. If you look closely at your income action, this icon says that during your income action, you can pay 10 coins to move 1 patrician from this pool over to their seat in the scoring region. You only get to move 1 and it costs 10 coins, but it can be worth it as patricians hand out points. The green patricians give points for adjacency to public buildings. For each building you own, you gain 1 point for each public building next to it. And you multiply this by the number of green patricians if there's more than 1. The silver patrician only cares about the pelicans. For each pair of pelican tokens you have used, you gain 3 points. If you have an odd number, then you have one that cannot be paired and it does not get you any points. Tokens that are still purple side up do not count. The yellow patrician is all about the mines. If you have at least one mine in each row of the mines, you gain 2 points. And in the same way, if you have at least 2 in each row, you gain 4 points. And last, there's the red patricians. For each column of your player board in which all houses have been removed, you gain 3 points. In order to score any of those, you need at least one corresponding patrician there, and of course, the more patricians of the same color, the more points the players can score in that category. And as all good things come to an end eventually, the game ends after 5 rounds in a 4-player game or in 6 rounds in a 2- or 3-player game. And it's time to evaluate the results of your strategies and count the final scoring. Let's start with the buildings. You go through the city building by building and award the owner of each building 1 point for each matching dot on an adjacent building or side of the board. So this building scores 4 points for the blue player, and you continue like this until you have evaluated all of the players' buildings. Then let's move on to the mines. You go through each row of mines and count up the total number of stars in that row. Then you give players points according to their rank in that row. For example, purple has 1 star, blue has 2 stars in this row, and green has 4. The row also has 2 stars from rocks, so it's a 9-star row. Green will get 3 points, blue 2, and purple 1. Players with no stars get no points even if they own a mine in that row. Players tied for a place get the full value of the place. For example, if 2 players are tied for second and third, they both get full points for second, but no one gets points for third. And we also do income one last time, but instead of taking any actual coins, you just calculate how much you would get. You divide that number by 10, round it down, and you score that many points. For example, if your income is 48, you score 4 points. Also, some players may gain or lose points based on the final position of their markers on their reputation tracks. And last, you score extras. You score 1 point for each building tile in a slot on your board, each claimed plot that you did not build on, and each pelican token you did not use. And of course, the player with the most points wins. In case of a tie, you break ties in favor of the player with the most remaining money. If there's still a tie, then players need to settle this by jousting, unless players can accept that it's a draw. One last thing to mention is that in a 2-player game, you use these special cards called event cards. The event cards are used to increase the economic activity of the game. At the beginning in the setup, you separate the event cards into decks A and B, and you shuffle both. Each round, except the last, will have an event. The rounds before the red patrician stack have A events, and the rounds after have B events. You reveal each event before the corresponding round starts, and you always look at the tax symbol in the upper left corner, which tells you to advance the tax counter by the amount shown. As a variant of the game, you can also use these event cards in a 3- or a 4-player game. And as we already mentioned, as you get more familiar with the game, in further games, we recommend you to draft the guilds at the beginning of the game and choose their position on your board. And now you know the rules of Kutná Hora and you can go ahead and play your first game. My suggestion would be to keep your eyes open for what other players do and want, and try to take advantage of the low prices when building before they go up again. Best of luck with it, and if you have any questions, we're happy to answer them in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel, it's for free, and I'll see you guys in the next video.